Good afternoon. I'm Garvin Blake, pan player, born in Belmont, Trinidad, and been residing in New York for over 50 years. My journey started probably at birth, because when I was born, roughly when I was probably like 2 years old, there was a band named Steelpan that practiced next to me on St. Barb's Road in Belmont. My cousins played there, I had an uncle that played there. So pan has always been in my head. As I got a little older, maybe by the time I'm like 5, my cousin would show me some songs. David Mondi, he played with Pan Up North Star, so he had a pan in the yard, so he would show me some tunes. So I got that early exposure. So I don't really remember myself without pan being somewhere in the picture. It might not have been there when I was 1 or 2, but I don't have those memories. My memory of myself in Trinidad is like, there was pan somewhere, either in the yard or next door. I came over to New York when I was 9 years old. Between 5 and 9 was really having a pan in the yard. First the band was next door, then they folded, but we always had a pan, and then we had a little children's band where we'd have a combination of a couple of pans, out-of-tune pans, full-size 55-gallon drums, and some tin cans. So it was like a combination. We had our own little band. But my cousin, David Mondi, he had a spiderweb tenor from Pan Am North Stars that he would show me songs. So my first quote-unquote playing pan was him showing me Mr. Walker. So that had to be like 1968, somewhere around there. So that was my first song that I learned. And from there, they said it was always pan, and then when I was 9, we came up here. Yeah, so when I came at 9, the first couple of years, I really wasn't into pan. You're 9-year-old, you're just trying to adjust to life in this big urban place. So I didn't really do any pan for the first couple of years, but what I did do is I had some friends from, we would call it elementary school, Trinidad might be primary school, that we formed a little band. Had no pan, it was more or less American guys, and I was like the drummer. So I did that probably when I was like 10, 11. Then the summer of like 74, I went to Trinidad, and then I got kind of reintroduced to pan. I never forgot it, but I went down there was a pan, this time it was a double tenor. And my cousin again showed me some songs. And when I came back up, I was like, I gotta join a band when I get to New York. I asked around, who knows anyone in the band. My immediate family didn't play. But then a friend of a friend, he said, oh, this couple that lives in the apartment with me, they play in a band. And they so happened to be Kendall Williams' parents, who's the noted arranger now, scholar. So his parents were in a band and they took me. So I started playing then. I was probably like about 12 years old. So that was my formal playing in a steel band. So that was in New York. Every now and then in life you stumble upon a gem and you get lucky. So Bradley was my good fortune. So I played pan for like about 5 or 6 years in a couple of different bands. Then I heard Bradley was coming to New York. So by the time he was coming to New York, that was 81, I've already been tracking Bradley. So I had Pan and Harmony, that record I would play it over and over, Crawford. I went to Trinidad in 1977 to experience it firsthand. So I took time off. I was in junior high then. So when I heard Clive Bradley was coming in, the band that I played in, they were kind of going through, kind of being defunct. So it wasn't the same band, Brooklynairs, that it was when I first joined. So when I heard Bradley was coming, I was like, that's where my summer's going to be. So when I went down there, this was Metro Steel on Fulton. Primarily it was guys from Desperados that started it. They were Despas USA before that, they changed their name. So when I got there, it was Metro. But that happens to be the first year Bradley came. Then I met him, and within the first couple of weeks, he kind of took a liking to me, and he gave me opportunities, you'll be the point man, I'll show you the song, or they call them section leaders. So I started doing that, working directly, taking music from him. And by the end of the summer, he was giving me opportunities to do little parts of songs. We'd say, okay, try to harmonize this on the double second, which I played double second. Then I would come up with some lines. He would say, okay, that's good. No, maybe not. So the mentorship was more encouragement and opportunity. So he gave me opportunity to kind of try my hand at arranging, singled me out as someone that he'd like to be the point person to give the music, especially in the front line. So that's how that started. And over the years, he gave me more opportunities, more guidance, and I would ask him a lot of questions. Working with Bradley was like a musical awakening for me, because the groups that I played with before, I wouldn't say the groups, but the group right before I went to Bradley, Brooklyn, they had a different style of music. Their music was more, like I said, more ornate, intricate lines that went up and down. It required a lot of physical dexterity. But when I went to Bradley, it was like, 20 notes that you needed 20 notes to create this effect. Bradley was able to do this at 5 notes. So it opened my ears to like a different way of looking at music, where before the music was, I considered linear. It was lines going left and right, front line heavy. Whereas Bradley's music he built from the foundation up. So his music was more vertical. The notes really aligned this way. They went this way too, but it had a vertical stacking and layering that I hadn't experienced. His double tenors played, interesting lines that complemented it. Over the time I realized it's really counterpoint he was doing, but at first it was just, and it's still, if I listen to Bradley, it's still mind-boggling what he's able to do with so few notes and the use of space. So I think Bradley opened my ears to that silence is just as important as sound, and together, that's where you get music, as opposed to just, notes after note. So it was that was a musical awakening, and, one of my great musical experiences. So I started with Bradley in 81, and I stayed with him with Metro until 1990. Bradley didn't arrange every year. Some years he didn't come to New York, or he was in New York and didn't arrange. In 90, that was a kind of important year. That's the year we went to Panorama with Tell Me Why, and somewhere in the middle of the song, Bradley asked me to do a part for the Panorama song. So before I was doing little parts in what we would call stateside songs, or songs you would play on a block party, so you had me do this long, it was not long, say like a 32 bar thing, which would be fairly long. So that was great. So then we went to the Panorama and won, not a result of my part, a result of his part. He was being kind to me, allowing me that exposure. So we won that Panorama, and Steelpan politics, I don't know exactly what happened. The band split. So Metro came down to Flatbush. We were in Bed-Stuy then. So Metro stayed, Bradley came with Metro, and I stayed with the other group, which the first year was called Metropolitan Steel, but ultimately they turned into Despas USA. So Bradley went, with Metro, and I stayed with Despas USA. And so at that point, they gave me the opportunity to do the song. So that was my first full Panorama song on my own. So that would be 91.
And how did they do that to you?
Not very well. So that year, we came off the win. So I'm doing my, I was like, I'm arrange the song. I'm like, okay. But either I was brave, stupid, or a combination of both. So I decided, this is my first year. I'm like a young guy. I'm going to not do the song. I'm going to write my own song. So I wrote my own composition, Pan Romance, and went there with this composition, and it was different kind of music. I blame it on my youth. I was all over the place trying ideas. So we came 6th that year with Pan Romance. They didn't fire me, so I was like, okay. They said, we'll give you another shot. Then the second year, that's when Despas USA, they changed to Despas USA. I said, you know what? It's a combination of myself and the band saying, this music is just too either wild or too out there. The judges are not feeling it. So I did a Byron song, Sweetness is My Weakness, and we came 2nd. That was to Bradley. Bradley arranged for Metro. So the thing is, all I was doing the song, Bradley would come by, listen to it, and, not directly impact what I'm doing, but listen out and say, yeah, I like where this is going. But I know one time he came down, and it was almost like it wasn't a threat, it was like a statement. He said, Garvin, but music song is sweet, but you know what, the race is for 2nd. Meaning that I ain't beating him. So fortunately we came 2nd. So I always consider that, yeah, we came 2nd, but I thought the year before was actually better music, but that's how judging goes. So that was my second year. I came second. And after that, I didn't arrange for Despers USA the year after. Again, I'm always in panorama stuff and out. So it's like I wasn't comfortable with my role and how the band was going. So I took a year off. I didn't do anything. And then Tony Tributes from Pan Rebels called me to arrange. And then I arranged that year. And what song I did? Fire Coming Down. It's a Robert Greenwich composition. Then we came second with that. And then I arranged one more year, which was 95, which is 30 years ago, was my last panorama song, which was On the Road, Ronnie McIntosh, popular song, and we came third with that. And again, my daughter was born in 93. I didn't really see a future of me every summer, 3-4 hours in a pan yard, so I decided I got to do something else musically. That wasn't working for me. So I had people think that I arranged, but I had this really short cameo as an arranger. So after that, Ralph Robinson, I think he came in the picture. He's a noted Trinidad pianist. He passed away maybe about 8 years ago. He was living in New York, and a friend of mine who also played with us back in the Metro days said Ralph was looking for a pan player. And he recommended me, so I started playing with Ralph. So that was my first time playing in a mixed environment where there's one pan and conventional instruments. So I started doing that with Ralph for maybe 4 or 5 years. But Ralph would be, sometimes he's in New York, sometimes he's in Trinidad, he's in DC. So I started more focusing on that. And from Ralph, I think that's where I really kind of changed gears. From Ralph, I started meeting other musicians. And that's, I decided that this was, because I always worked full time, this was a better balance for me. That I kind of control what I'm doing, meet with these guys, have these long rehearsals. And I always, even before I met Ralph, I always improvised. It might not have been called jazz, but I called it ramage. So it was something that I always wanted to express. So this gave me an opportunity, and I think it offered a better life balance, work-life family balance, where panorama is like you're down there all night, and that wasn't working for me musically, and it wasn't working for me socially. Jazz is one of these words, depending on who you speak to, they have a different definition. So I consider jazz, at the heart of it, is improvisation. So if you agree with my definition, loose definition, I've always kind of been doing that kind of stuff. We would stay after the practice and improvise, go and come up with your own stuff. So I've always done that. When I went with Ralph, it became a little bit more, I wouldn't say formal with Ralph, but you could use that in terms of this is what you were expected to do on a gig. So before I was doing that in the pan, 2 a.m. or 12 o'clock in the day, this is you doing it on a gig, and you're the only pan player. So at that point, I started listening to more jazz. So I grew up listening to calypso and panorama stuff. So when I got with Ralph, I started listening to more jazz, getting records first, then cassette tapes, reading liner notes to see, you read about this, okay, Charlie Parker, there's Dizzy Gillespie, there's Monk, and then there's Clifford Brown, and then, so that kind of opened my musical universe. So I grew up on Sparrow, Shadow, Ray Hallman, Clive Bradley, Jit Samaru. So I grew up on that stuff. But then this was this other world that I would hear, because in New York you would hear that stuff, but I never focused on it. So I started paying more attention to that. And even with Bradley, some of the advice he gave me when I would ask him, how do you grow as a musician? He said, you really got to find out who's doing what you do and listen to them, figure out what they're playing, try to imitate that. So he kind of pointed me in that direction too. Even when I started improvising, one of my goals, I don't think I've ever achieved it. I was always a big Ray Hallman fan. Actually, before Clive Bradley, I was probably a Ray Hallman fan. So I would always hear like Queen of the Bands, whatever Ray did a song, I would call it the first variation would be this really colorful solo. You know, they wouldn't call it a solo, but it's Ray would keep the chords and then do something really colorful. So back then I was trying to copy that. So I didn't know I was transcribing. I was, listening to Pan and Harmony. I would listen to a Boogsy back in Rags to Riches days. So I was taking that music. So that's my first influence, panorama music. And when I improvised, I tried to use those ideas and that phrasing. But when I got exposed to jazz, I started listening as the names that I called. And by osmosis, I didn't actually single out one person and say, well, I want to sound like this one. That would be ludicrous anyway, because I couldn't sound like them. I just kind of immersed myself in the idiom. Listen to it as much as possible, go to live concerts, read books, ask questions, and so I can't say like this one person that but it's normally the usual people, Parker, Miles, Sonny Rollins. Sonny Rollins I particularly like because of all the giants, he was one I was able to see live multiple times. So that was like, kind of like, I want to over exaggerate it, but it was like really transformative. It's like you heard other people play, you heard other people improvise, then you see Sonny Rollins play. And this was like, it was humbling and it was awe-inspiring. So he had an impact on me because I was able to see him live and I wasn't able to see Charlie Parker and those guys that came through records. And so I would say Sonny Rollins would be that from the jazz thing. Other than that, it's Sparrow, Kitchener, Ray, Bradley. So that's my foundation. How I think people express themselves musically, you become what you listen to and what you do. So as I grew up in Calypso, we had all the records. I grew up hearing that, not really listening to it on an intellectual level. Let's say, oh, this is the chord Kitchener's use. It's just Kitchener's music and this thing moves that way. Then I started listening to jazz and listen to it over and over. It gets into your bloodstream and you learn your instrument because that's key. Before anything, you got to be fluid or fluent on your instrument. So you put all these things together, it just comes out, I think. As opposed to me saying, well, I'm going to blend Kitchener with Charlie Parker. I don't really do that. I listen to a lot of Kitchener, listen to Charlie Parker, and I just go play. And some may come out, it may never come out, but I don't have a formula that way. I had written other songs that Metro had played, but they were never recorded. Pan Romance, so this is Calypso that I raised, and David Rudder ended up singing, which I was fortunate to be able to get David Rudder to sing. That's after we played it in Panorama, he sang it and recorded it.
Now anytime I hear you pan, a spirit move me head and hand. Something about the vibration.
The Panorama version of it was 1991, but I didn't record it with David Rudder until later in the 90s. So then when I did my first album, I wrote a song, Bella Road Blues, and that's an original. But then after that, I really kind of shied away from writing my own songs, probably for a couple of reasons. The primary reason is I started getting exposed to jazz standards. And these were like some really beautiful songs, whether it's a Wayne Shorter song or Duke Ellington or George Gershwin. I'm like, man, I can't write any songs like this. So I felt my time was better spent taking some of this material and trying to reconfigure it and improvise on top of it. Because I consider it improvisation, or if you change the harmony, I consider what I'm doing is I'm composing on top of it. Just, it's not formal composition. This is spontaneous. So I kind of haven't been writing original compositions. I always say I'm going to start back, but then I find some other song that I was like, man, I had never really learned to play this one. So I kind of been dealing more with what they call the American songbook, which is standards, jazz tunes, and a lot of calypso stuff. But I need to start back writing. But I don't know if I'll feel comfortable, putting them out there. So I got to get back to that, bravery I had with Pan Romance, but I didn't care and they put me sixth. I always worked full time, so travel was never one of these things that I wanted to do, and I didn't do much of it. So in terms of traveling the world, that's not me. It wasn't for me. It didn't. My lifestyle didn't afford that. But I was able to. I think where the music took me, I met some really great musicians. So that's like a place all of its own. It's like although you meet them in Brooklyn, but the person's experience. So I was able to meet a guy, Tony Cedrus from South Africa. We played for years before I played with Frankie McIntosh. I played with him, and in terms of physical places where it took me, I was fortunate to play Lincoln Center a couple of times. So that was a great experience. Knowing that all the great art that came through there, all the great musicians, classical, jazz. So that was special, and it also took me back to Trinidad for Panorama. So that I consider great too, because I think the first time I went back to Trinidad for Panorama was 1977. So I must have been really young. I begged my mother, I got to go to Trinidad. That time, I don't think too many kids were going to Trinidad back for Panorama. Now there's a lot more kids that go back. So I went that year, and I played Pan on the neck with high locks. So Pan in a way, not that I ever lost my Trinidad roots, it more grounded me in this. So there's people who may not know my background, actually probably think that I grew up in that tradition more than I didn't grow up physically in it, but I grew up in it spiritually, for a lack of it. And then I would go back and connect, and I eventually play with Pandemonium and Despas. So Pan took me back there. If I didn't play Pan, I probably would go to Carnival and drink a beer and we'll talk on the street. But it got me up Laventille Hill. It got me, to experience Trinidad's culture at its finest and its rawest. The unfiltered Trinidad that some people shy away from. I was part of that. Despa's Juve Morning. That's a spiritual thing. So Pan took me there. The last time I played there was like 92. I played on the road, and you're rolling on a stand, and people pushing, and people yelling, and so that I thought was special. So you have Lincoln Center on one end, which is pristine environment, great acoustics, the audience is quiet, is sitting. Then you juxtapose that to Juve, where it's rowdy, noisy, the stand is rocking, somebody bonks in your pan, somebody yelling out, might have a little skirmish in the back of the chair. Those are two extremes, but they're beautiful in of themselves. They're both special. One is a concert, and one, I can say you're down in the belly of the beast with the people. So both of those I consider equal. And I had those experiences in New York too, playing in clubs and the people. So I like that. I like to play when someone is sitting right there, so they get to hear all my mistakes. I think I'm most proud of is that I didn't throw my sticks away 30 years ago, so I think I'm proud. I'm glad that I stuck with it, and I'm out of the Panorama scene. I'm still out there, Lyman. My friends are still there. I mean, a lot of people that are arranging now, I was played with their parents. So the fact that I stuck with, not that I stuck with the culture, that the culture stuck with me. It's so, I can't get rid of it. Sometimes I wish I could, but other than that, I don't have any proud moments. I think I'm glad that I was exposed to Pan at an early age, and I was able to continue playing it. And some people may have enjoyed what I did when I was in the Panorama arranging, and some people might say, okay, what he's doing now is cool. And you probably have just as many that say, oh, that guy should have never arranged, and he should have worked a 9 to 5. I don't know what the hell he's doing.
Where do you see Steelpan's place in jazz and world music today?
I don't think instruments have a place. I think musicians have a place. So the instrument is this really an inanimate object. So the instrument could work in multiple contexts. Some contexts I think is more favorable. I mean, there's a school of people that will say, nah, pannists play anything and it could go. That's true to a certain extent. If you have 12 tones, you could potentially play most Western music. But I think there's certain genres pan tends to work well in, but it's always been that way. You know, there's been people going all the way back to Emmanuel Jack Riley and those guys. They were playing quote unquote jazz, meaning they would improvise, and people like Othello Molino in Florida in the 70s and Rudy Smith in Europe. So I think musicians have a place. So I think it's not that pan has a place anywhere or doesn't have a place. It's a musician has to decide how they want to express themselves. Do they want to do it in a jazz context? Do they want to play strum in a rock band? You could do that too. So I think it's more, the instrument is not really limited. Any limitation is probably how a musician sees him or herself. To embrace anything that is not your native tongue, meaning that you didn't grow up with, because a lot of times if you grow up in pan and calypso or soca, you may, as I said, you may not study it intellectually, but you kind of know it. So, and some people do study it intellectually, so they know the mechanics. But now, when you move to another genre, now you got to learn the foundation. You know, what makes that different? So it's like learning anything. You learn your basics, you know, whatever the genre is. Listen to the best, you know, in the case of jazz or any music, and desperately in the case of jazz or classical, try to play with the best people. You know, I think my theory, and it's probably still this way, it may not be that hard to do, is try to be the worst person in the band. So you want to be around people that you got to listen to them and say, I got work to do. You know, you don't want to go there and like, I'm the king and everyone's bowing to you. Not that that happens, but you want to, at all possible, play with people a level above you, and people that are at that level that's willing to play with you, because there's going to be people at above your level that, nah, you can't play here. You just, you know, go back to the minor league. So try to find people who will encourage you and push you, you know. And as I said, anything in life, you learn your basics. You know, they tell you, you know, your scales and all that stuff. No one has to tell a young player that. Pan has, not pan in general, but just music, but pan has a unique issue in the sense that there's music theory, which a lot of kids are learning now. But then we can't forget the mechanics of playing the instrument. And sometimes the two get separated. You become really good and you could name this and you learn it, but then the mechanics of playing the instrument, I haven't seen that. That hasn't been placed in the as much emphasis in the academies or the universities as much as I think it probably should. But maybe it's there and I'm not seeing it. I'm saying it shouldn't be forgotten. The ability to play an instrument without even knowing music, that's fundamental, because pan evolved without people really formally knowing music. I think they knew music because if you're playing music, you know it. But a lot of them grew up in an era where they knew how to play the instrument. So they may not have gone to UTT or whatever schools or Berkeley, but they knew the mechanics of the instrument because of the tradition that was handed down, almost kind of like the African. It's not, it's considered oral and visual. It's like, oh, that's what he does. You know, so I think young pan players, you learn your theory, but your mechanics, you're not going to get that in a book. Like maybe Teague and those people like that might be trying to codify that, and that would be helpful.
To connect with Garvin Blake and to learn more about his upcoming performances, please check the description below for his social media contact.